2 weeks ago, The Times released an article titled, "Are You Wealthy for Your Age?" This particular article leapt out at me because I thought, oh, here we go. It's going to be an interesting study covering some of the key stats for you to benchmark whether you're doing well in life, whether you're actually preparing yourself for a so-called decent retirement. I was able to find a summary of the article through Instagram format. So the reason why I've been thinking about this article for about a week and a half now is because if you remember on the 25th of Feb, we did a podcast, which was a debate between Gary Stevenson from Gary Economics and Dave Rubin, which is like a US economist, if you will, or a pundit, should we say. Most people are familiar with Gary Stevenson. I mean, he's got one of the best selling books right now. And he quite bluntly says that the UK economy and many economies in the West are rigged against poor people, and the poor and wealthy divide is the gap's just going to continue widening to the point where normal people won't be able to afford houses. They're not going to be able to afford anything, really. And I agree with most of the talking points, and you would have gathered that from my analysis last time. And
right now, I haven't been wrong many times in the past. Listen, you're from my country, okay? You know, people that look like me and sound like me don't get a chance to make millions of pounds betting on the economy.
That's regarding people from his background being in these high paid jobs. When I listen to Gary Stevenson, though, I do agree with most of the sentiment of what he says. There's always a little bit of me that goes, but is he exaggerating? Yes, it's very difficult to be part of the wealthy in this country. Something definitely needs to be done around paying people better wages and creating salaries or incomes that just allow you to live a normal life, let alone be wealthy. Completely agree with the fact that that needs to be addressed at scale. But then a part of me goes, yeah, but is he exaggerating? Because there are people my age, and I'm 36 and younger, that have been able to buy a house and they are making a decent living. Is he just being negative? I definitely know a lot of people that have no hope. But I also know some that are doing pretty well for themselves. And I'm also conscious of the fact that I'm in a bit of a bubble, working in the tech sector, et cetera, et cetera. So I like to be conscious of that. So then this article comes along from the Times saying, "Are you wealthy?" In the week plus time that I had to really think about these stats, I've gone through a wave of emotions. And perhaps in the comment section, you can also add your take on this. Let's go.
Most people your age. We analysed the finances of the top 20% of earners for their age, their income, savings, pensions, and property wealth. Here's what we found.
So must stress that this is an analysis of combined household income. So initially when I saw it, I thought, okay, great. So this, whatever I'm going to get shown, I can kind of divide it by two and figure out what I need to achieve. But then I thought, hold on a second, I'm not married. So that was scary. And then the next consideration I had was, well, actually, we're about to see the stats for your 30s. Ideally, it's for a married couple, because if you're sharing property wealth, if you're combining income, and if you're planning for pensions together, I hope you've got something that's binding. But then I thought to myself, maybe we need to factor in the risk of divorce, because that's something that commonly halves your wealth. Or let's also factor in the fact that the marriage rates in the UK are in a steep decline.
In your 30s, high-earning households make an average of £106,566 per year.
Now, it says in your 30s, so maybe I have till the age of 39 to get to this salary if I were to be single or separated or whatever. And that's a lot of fuel that I need to put into the engine, 106,000. I'm just not sure how many industries are paying that to, 30-year-olds, and how accessible those type of jobs are. I mean, what would you have to do? The tech sector could definitely get you into that, or you could be a private business owner. Hopefully that could be obtainable that way, or consultancy jobs, etc., etc. But this is meant to be the top 20% of earners. It's bananas that's now considered wealth. What about the other 80%? Are we talking combined household incomes of 40 grand, 50 grand, 60 grand? How is that going to affect the other three buckets? Let's not whiz through this too much. £172,162 in your 30s. At what time did you start building this pension fund? I remember when I was in my 20s, I was auto enrolled into a pension fund, and they were only taking out maybe £100, £200, max £300 a month. And how on earth are you meant to get to £172,000 by the time you're in your 30s for your pension pot? And now we're going to go into property wealth. And this is where I start thinking, whoa, this is very, very difficult. A bit of property wealth. So by the time you're 30, you're meant to have £157,000 locked into property, but also have a pension pot of £172,000, whilst having a combined household income of £106,000. Something doesn't add up here, because if we're truly starting from zero, by the time you get into the working world, I know you can work from 16. Let's just assume that it all starts to really pop off at the beginning of 20. Somehow between then and this, you're looking to amass approximately £129,000, whatever, worth of equity amongst both the pension and the property wealth. And on top of that, £32,000 worth of cash savings. Now, if we make the assumption that this pension fund really represents the average pension fund, so we're not including ISAs or pension ISAs. People have saving ISAs. They might be invested in the S&P 500, which has an average return of approximately, 12% to 15% year on year average. Let's pretend they're not participating in those type of funds, and that they're really just contributing to a standard legal and general pension fund or something like that. Then one of these nest pensions where you're auto enrolled. Then let's have a look at what they would have to be doing from the age of 20 to, let's say, 39 to get that £172,000 over £1,000 over the line. So this compound interest calculator, I love using this. I've always, I've been playing with this type of thing since I learned about a little bit about investments back when I was 25. So for anyone that's interested, this is a really neat tool that kind of teaches you how your money can compound over time. I actually want to share what the average rates of the average interest rates in pensions are in the UK. So in the UK, the leading pension funds have delivered an average return of 7.72%. I've never received that, even during bull runs. While savers nearing retirement have seen average returns of 5.27. And it says here, references Legal and General said that the average return rate is 6.73. Anyway, the moral story is it's somewhere between 6 and 7%. Cool. So now let's call it 6.5%. Let's make an assumption that from the age of 16 to 20, you're the perfect young person. Every £20 note, every £5 note that your nan has given you throughout your birthdays, all your birthday money has been saved. You were really, really frugal. You skipped the craze for PlayStation 2, PlayStation 3. You bought no games. You just thought you're a young little Warren Buffett and you said to yourself, I just want to work on my pension fund because that's my dream, right? So let's just say you put all that money together, starting from zero, so you're not receiving any inheritance or a boost or anything like that, and you started to save 5K somewhere between the age of 16 and the age of 23 or 22, whenever you graduate from uni. Now, I'm assuming that you would have graduated from uni, because if we're going to get to that £107,000 or 16, you don't have a specific career that can get you there, or some level of business acumen that can get you over the line. Either way, you're going to spend money on some level of education. If you're a builder, right, you would have had to save for tools, had to do your driving license, you would have had to invest in courses of some sort. You're still going to burn through cash. So we must assume that you're not going to have a lot of accumulated cash. But yeah, somewhere between 16 and 22, you would have amassed £5,000 as your baseline. So you've put that down. You said, right, that's gonna kick off my my pension fund. So that's a 6.5 annual return. And then we're gonna say you're so responsible. And from the age of 22, you're gonna put away £336. See, you can tell that I've kind of worked the numbers before this. You're going to do £336 for 18 years straight. So that's between the age of 18 and 39. Actually, no, we'll have to shave off a year, aren't we? You would have had to invest £336 with a baseline of £5,000 religiously per month between 22 and 39, or the last day of 39, in order to achieve £176,421.95. I mean, what are the odds of that? What are the odds that you've been educated, that's what you need to achieve? They don't even teach us in schools. And even if you knew it, you would have to have uninterrupted income, allowing you to have an excess of £336 monthly to invest in your pension pot to that number, according to my trusted compound interest calculator. Now, maybe I've done something wrong. I'm notorious for getting or overlooking certain aspects of things, but seems about right. Okay, doable, you're thinking. Brilliant. Now, if we go back to those figures, okay, you've done that, tick. You've got the pension fund sorted. Now let's look at the next target. So whilst doing all of that, you've also got to have £157,000 in property wealth. Oh yeah, by the way, the number was 172,000, so I went over a little bit, but let's call it 332,000, £332 that you need to put into your pension pot. But now we're into property wealth. Whilst doing that, you also need to put together a deposit and have enough of a salary to gain confidence from a bank to sell you your first property. So typically, banks will assess 5 times your salary in order to secure a property, at least here in London. And I don't know, if we're talking about like apartments or whatever, you can get apartments somewhere between 350,000 and 500,000 if you're being conservative and you're going for a property that's not too luxurious. And I guess outside of London, there are plenty of other properties that are cheaper. But regardless, you would have to have had, by the time you're 40, the opportunity to put together that, as well as putting the 336 per month into your pension scheme. You also have to have amassed enough of a deposit to get onto the property ladder, and also have that average salary for you to amass this £157,000. Now it's getting difficult. And then the next blow is you would also have to have that emergency fund, being £1,000 saved up in cash, to also hedge the fact that you've got a lot of it locked into your pension scheme. You need to upkeep the property. If you get fired, if anything happens, you need to make sure you have at least, I mean, in this case, it would be maybe 3 months worth of salary, I would say, if I'm not mistaken. 3 or 4 months worth of salary accumulated to keep you afloat in case anything happens, an emergency, something breaks in your property or whatever, to not interrupt these 4 categories. I just think that bar is really high. And after reflecting for about a week, I started off by going, oh man, this is not that bad, to thinking, hold on a second. Unless you live your life perfectly from the age of 16, and when I mean perfectly, you're educated, you're given this knowledge from the start, you're disciplined, you don't have any chaos in your life. You either get married early and have a trusting relationship and it works out, and you both understand this and you work towards this goal. You don't do the family holidays. I mean, if you have a wedding, you're probably going to sink some money into that anyway. I can't see how this is doable. There's going to be edge cases, but I don't see how this can be achieved by 20% of the nation, especially if you're not married. And data, and also with saying that, well, let's have a look at the marriage statistics. So if we look at, because, you know, I've just gone, oh yeah, marriage rates in the UK are going down. Let's have a look at what the number of marriages are. So here we have a study by Statista, love Statista. They put together all sorts of different amazing surveys and data sets. So in this one, we have the number of marriages between 1887 and 2020. And they get all of their data. They put the sources here, basically town hall records, all that type of stuff across the UK. They released this in 2023, but between 1887 and all the way up to 1940, marriage is just popular, right? Just happening. Everyone's on it, with about 533,000. And then, you know, goes down a little bit. Then it spiked. I'm guessing that in 1944. I wonder what important thing happened in 1944. And boom, we start to recover marriage rates in 1972. But from 1972 onwards, it has just been plummeting. And in fairness, this massive drop that you see in 2019 is obviously because of COVID. I don't need to explain why. But regardless, we're still going in that direction. So we can agree that marriage is losing popularity. It's going down in popularity. Or maybe it is popular, but people are just finding it very difficult to get married. Full stop, let alone in your early 20s or in your 30s to get to that goal that we were looking through before. And then the second risk factor, because this is all about combined household income. So maybe you could achieve it living with your parents. It could be interesting. I was also thinking about the divorce rate. So it's a bit confusing, but it says that the divorce rate in 2022 saw a decline with 6.7 divorces per 1,000 men and 6.6 divorces per 1,000 women in the married population, marking the lowest since 1971, which is fantastic. However, in 2022, around 42% of marriages in the UK ended in divorce. More recent figures indicate a further decline, marking the lowest. Okay, I don't understand these figures a lot, but I guess what I was trying to say is divorce is another factor, because that can just immediately halve everything you've built. And that's something else that we have to factor in, which is how realistic is it that you're going to be together in your 20s, or you're going to be with someone in your 40s and have the privilege to achieve these numbers. But I was very infused when I saw this. And then I said to myself, man, yeah, this is the 20% of wealthiest earners. And I would be shocked if any like normal people in the medium range, whether they could even achieve any of these in any given category. And that just makes me reflect that what Gary Stevenson is saying is very, very true. Because he's not saying that no one has wealth, but he's just saying that your average UK person, they have almost no chance of ever being stable in a retirement. So let's look at the compounding effects of this going forward. So now we're going to go into what you should have in your 40s.
Their secret? They maximize tax-efficient pensions and ISAs.
We got the mention of the ISAs. No one in school even mentioned what an ISA was. I went through secondary school, university, and several different jobs afterwards. And the first time that someone mentioned an ISA to me, like what an investment ISA was, when I was 26. I didn't know what Vanguard was. I didn't know what an ETF was. All I knew was that a pension was something that you would just auto-enroll to. And no one ever read the documentation. And even if you read the documentation, well, what choices do you have? Can you even select your own pension? Usually the company has a pension scheme, and the way I saw it is, well, that's all you've got. So you would have to be educated to even know the instruments to get to £172,000 in pensions by the time you're in your 30s. It's bananas to me. Like, it really breaks my heart that probably, and please someone correct me if you're in the education system, this should be one of the main subjects, especially when we're talking about a nation that has an issue with issues with the National Health Service, problems with taxation, riddled with government debt. And the more people that are independent and have the right knowledge base to claw that pension that's needed to have a respectable retirement, the earlier you teach these kids, the better. And none of this was taught to me. I'm 36 now, and I really hope that's changed. If there's any teachers watching this, please correct me. But I've got a 13-year-old daughter, and she hasn't touched this, and she probably won't. I ask her every year, has anyone mentioned this to you? Nothing, and she's almost going to finish year 8 now.
And most importantly, they take advantage of time. Compound growth over decades is a game changer. In your 40s, the wealthiest households saw their incomes peak. Their pension savings nearly triple, while their property wealth grows.
Income only rises to 114 combined, which says a lot about age. And I mean, the fact that between 30 and 40, you may have only gone up maybe 10 or 15 grand. I didn't understand that statistic. If anyone can explain that one to me. Your pensions have to more than double. It's just bizarre to me. And then property wealth. Property wealth is at 272,000. So basically what this is representing is, oh, you've paid your mortgage for another 10 years. So you've really been putting money into that pension scheme more than anything. But let's see where we land on the savings.
This is the moment to supercharge pension contributions, making the most of...
So savings were at 36,000. So again, we're still looking at that 3 month to 4 month worth of emergency fund. It's the pension pot that really annoys me, because that education is not in there. It's not there for you to get those decades of compound growth that they've just mentioned. No one's being taught this.
higher earnings before retirement.
And it's not on the telly. You know, right about now, we're on the 8th of April, 2025, and the last month of headlines has been nothing but Trump. People, there's not enough of this spoken about in the media, and you'd think it would be like honestly, there should be TV channels about this that are part of channel 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Channel 6 should be this. Channel 6 should just be useful information for people to not have to rely on the government. How about that for Channel 6? A free channel that you get. I mean, terrestrial TV, I know everyone's digital now, but you get my point, right? Something's got to be done where people are just bombarded with useful information so that they don't have to rely on the government for it, especially for this, because people need to understand that this is the baseline for them to have a respectable retirement. They say wealthy. This isn't wealth. This is just to survive, in my opinion, for you to have a dignified retirement. Why do I say dignified? What if you have a health scare? At least you've got assets to liquidate. You know, you have to rely on the government to issue you a nurse or give you the right support. At least you can leverage your assets. A retirement home of some sort. You need these assets to rely on. And, you know, I've got no beef with then giving it to the government at the end, but at least give people a decent chance of having this when they get to the ripe old age, when they need it. But no, let's not educate people and then also start cancelling all the services that they're given.
And planning kicks in. By your 50s, top earners bring in £109,731 a year.
So in the 50s, they've gone a bit down. That's interesting.
Yeah. Their pension pots soar to £762,041.
£750,000, guys. £750,000. And that's under the assumption that you're still married, you haven't divorced.
Pounds, outpacing their property wealth. Why? Because while
and then your property wealth, well, that's probably around the time that you should have paid off your house, maybe, but not really. Well, if you're on 109,000, yeah, but if you're just on a normal average salary, odds are you haven't. Probably on a 30-year mortgage, you're probably going to get that over the line when you're 60.
Property wealth is shared in a household. Pensions grow individually, often with two earners building their own retirement funds. For the wealthiest in their 60s, the number reaches new heights, with £1.2 million in pensions.
£1.2 million in pensions by the time you're 60 for two people. That's it. Wealthy. Factor in, like I said, health scares, support you're going to need. This is the top 20% of earners. This is what makes you wealthy.
Over £400,000 in property and nearly £100,000 in cash savings. They are well prepared now for retirement. Of course, these are the top earners, not the average household. But the key takeaway: start early, invest wisely, and take advantage of tax-efficient growth.
Start early. You saw the picture of the child. Yeah, start early. A father, if you're a parent, the minute you have a child, open up an investment ISA for your child. I think you can contribute up to 6,000 or £8,000 a year in your ISA. If you've got that excess income, do it for your child. But honestly, it seems like the only way you could have achieved this is to live a perfect life from the age of 16 financially and have the educational instruments to get it over the line. This is meant to be the top 20% of earners in the country, or wealthy people, should we say. It's not mandated that you must achieve this. But I think the scary thing for me is that these figures don't seem like a lot of money for places like London, for big cities in the UK like Manchester, etc., etc. I generally don't think having 1.2 million at the age of 62 as a combined household income is enough for you to live la vida loca. I think it's a safe amount of money. Perhaps I don't need to worry too much, but I would dread to think anyone else that is participating outside of that 20%, the amount of stress, the amount of worry that they would incur at the age of 50, in their late 50s, thinking that they're actually going to go into this stage in life where they haven't even achieved maybe a quarter of those goals. It's something that ages you. It's something that depresses you. For anyone that's listening, let me know your thoughts. I don't mean to be doom and gloom. It is doable. There is a mechanism. You don't always have to inherit everything, which I guess is the positive side to this. But you do need to be very, very disciplined to get this over the line. Leave any comments,